Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar organized by JetBrains. I'm Paul Everett, PyCharm Developer Advocate, and I'll be your host. The topic for today's webinar is Effective Data Science with PyCharm. What a hot topic to cover. Our guest is Dan Toffin, data scientist and creator of a very new, meaning good, very new Pluralsight course about PyCharm and data science. Dan, just checking, when did that come out and how's the response been?
Hi, Paul. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this webinar. My course is about boosting data science productivity with PyCharm, and it came out a month ago. I'm very happy with the responses so far. I think the course really fills the gap between what PyCharm can do and what data scientists know about PyCharm.
That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah, I already received feedback from some data scientists that the course is really helping them get things done. And as an author, it always feels great to make this kind of positive impact and get such feedback.
Indeed, and sometimes on courses like this, you can aim too high, you can aim too low, so it's good to get feedback like that.
Yeah.
A little bit about Dan. Dan is a senior back-end developer for Dimensions, a research data platform hooking up over 140 million research resources. That's a big number. Talking about good timing, we just came out with the new Jupyter Notebook support in 2019.1, re-implemented everything in our Jupyter Notebook support. And Dan had time to get the update into his course, and we really wanted a webinar on this before PyCon, so the stars were aligned. All right, now that we're all set, I'd like to hand the mic over. Welcome, Dan, and thanks a bunch for joining us on this.
Thanks, Paul. So I'll start with the motivation for the topic of boosting data science productivity with PyCharm. Does anyone care about this topic? Is it even possible to do it? And there are some points about it. As a fact, there is growing interest out there in data science. It's becoming a more popular topic with each year. Also, as a fact, Python grows in popularity and Python is used a lot in data science. In my opinion, and I'm sure there are more people who agree, PyCharm is the best integrated development environment for Python. If you agree with this statement, then please write yes or hell yes in the questions pane. The problem is that from my observations, PyCharm tends to be underused in practice. Under the pressure of time, deadlines, and priorities, it's so easy to get comfy with a set of features and just stick with them. Once I discussed with a data scientist about PyCharm, and he told me that, yes, I'm using it. I know it can do a lot of things, but I only use a handful of features. So what can we do about this? When it comes to productivity, we all want some more of that. I think that other than getting a good sleep, there is no single thing that you can do to increase productivity. Instead, productivity is a game of death by 1,000 cuts. Waste a bit of time here with some import statements, waste a little time over there with the syntax of some library you haven't used for a while, and the day is gone. Then you become too busy to sharpen your skills and make the most out of the tools at your disposal. Now, according to some, preparing data is a huge part of data scientists' work, even without the complaining part. PyCharm has some great features to help data scientists work with data. Here is the plan for the rest of my presentation. So I will give an overview and short demos of 3 data-related PyCharm features: scientific mode, Jupyter support, and database support. Let's switch to PyCharm.
Hey, Dan, if you could
Yes.
you bring up at some point during the webinar your page for the Pluralsight course? We got asked a question, what's the URL and information about it?
Okay. Okay, I will leave this for the end of the
Okay, that's fine.
Of the talk. Okay. So let's start with the scientific mode. The scientific mode is a set of features for making PyCharm friendlier for working with data. So I will start with some really basic code. So the classic hello world, and I'll print it on one line, hello, second line world. And just running this is something very basic. We can just get the hello world message. So nothing extraordinary here. But look what happens when we are adding this to some of the lines. So once we add this and go here to view scientific mode, we get the documentation window here, which I prefer to keep as a pop-up. And we have these green triangles in the gutter. Now, hovering on them, we see execute cell in console. So basically, we moved from an ordinary Python file to executing pieces from this file as cells. So just hitting the green arrow, this line is executing. Also with Control Enter, the next line is executing. So now if we turn off the scientific mode, then this becomes back just an ordinary Python file. Okay, next, here I have a data folder, and I have the Titanic.csv file, which is basically a classic data set with data about passengers on Titanic, including those who survived. And what I'm going to do is to write a bit of code in the scientific mode using these cells to read from this file and display make some plots with it. Okay, so I will import pandas, and now read the CSV. Notice how while typing we already have the documentation. I will adjust a bit the font size. And now we need to indicate the path to the Titanic file. And I prefer to have operating system independent way, so not using a hard-coded value, but using path. So path is a new module, I think, in Python 3.3 or 3.4. It's in the pathlib. It's automatically imported. And here is a nice feature that I really like about the scientific mode. Now, typically you expect to execute a cell, right? But what if I want to execute just a tiny piece of the cell, not the full cell, because I'm not ready to execute the full thing. I only want to execute this selection. And with PyCharm, I can, there is a shortcut for it, execute selection in console, Alt-Shift-E. And okay, I get an error. That's because I first need to run this statement and afterwards do the selection again. And it basically tells me that, hey, you're in the current directory. From here, I can join path and go to the data folder and then to Titanic.csv. Now, I'm going to run this. And yes, the data was loaded. So I'm going to assign a variable to this. So let's say Titanic data frame. I like to reformat the file once in a while. And I can execute again this cell. And here I get this view with the variables, and I see the Titanic data frame, and I have the option to view it as data frame. Clicking here is showing the scientific view. The scientific view is quite interesting because it allows us to see data and plots, two items which are very interesting to data scientists. Paul, are there any questions so far?
No, not yet. One thing to point out to people, some people are expecting this part to be Jupyter oriented, and you'll get to our new Jupyter support later. You're showing kind of the scientific mode, which is how to do data science kind of in a real IDE kind of way.
Yeah, Yeah, and from here we'll transition to Jupyter.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, so we loaded the Titanic data frame, and note that okay, here in data I can see the data frame, but I can also do more things. So I'm going to let's say I want to get a sample of this data, and from Titanic data frame I'm going to pick up a sample of 10 items. So executing this, a variable sample Titanic is created here, and I can also view it as a data frame. Now, here is an interesting thing. If I rerun this cell, the data in the scientific view is automatically updated. So note that we have some passenger IDs here. Executing this cell again is going to update the data.
We're getting a couple of questions about what key sequence you're using to do that update.
Oh, great question. So Control Enter. So this is equivalent to executing the cell in console. And also something which is easily transferable to Jupyter. We'll see that immediately.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. And I still have access to the old data. So that's basically, this allows us to look at data. These are data frames, but we can also see some. For example, if I'm taking the Titanic data frame and I want to see how many null values I have there, so I hit again Control Enter, and I expect this to be available here. There it is. It's a series, and I get the sum of null values for each column. We can see, for example, at age, we have a few with cabin and so on. Also note that there are these color differences which are quite helpful when you want to get the big picture. You can see here how the background color varies with the value. It's a nice touch. And between these, there are also shortcuts to navigate between these. So Alt left key and Alt right key allows us to easily switch between them. Okay, so this is part of the scientific view, what we see in data. But we can also use plots, and let's do that. Let's try to plot some things. So I'm going to import Seaborn as SNS. Then from matplotlib, I want to matplotlib pyplot. I want to import. So from matplotlib, import pyplot as plt. And now I want to do a count plot to look at. I want to look at survivors. So those who survived. So looking at their sex, so males or females, and using the Titanic data frame. So I'm going and show this plt dot show. I'll hit Control Enter to execute this cell. Fingers crossed. And it works. So here we can see on the left side, so those who didn't survive, they have 0, and those who survived, 1. So we notice that there are a lot of males who didn't survive. And that's, let's say, this is part of the initial data exploration. Now, we can also do another one. So I'll make a new cell and try out, I want a count plot, also to look at those who survived, but based on the passenger class. Also with the Titanic data frame. and show this. So I'll hit Control Enter again. And here we see some more on the distribution of these. So those who were in the third passenger class had a lower chance of surviving. Note that this plot appears, however, the old plot is still available, and we can also navigate easily between them with Alt, left, and right arrows. So that can be quite handy. Instead of saving plots to a file and then opening those files, we can easily navigate between these from within PyCharm. This can be quite a handy feature. Now, remember that PyCharm has a lot of other features. For example, the ability to refactor code. If we look at this code, we note that actually it's quite there is quite a bit of duplication here. So the code to show those who survived based on a sex and a passenger class. So what we can do is to simply extract this code into a separate function. So extracting a method, Control Alt M. I'll just call it count plot. Oh, no, wait, I'll use these. Control Alt M, count plot. Okay, and it basically created automatically this function. So put it this way, of course you can create it as well manually. However, having the IDE do it for you, to me it's quite a handy feature. And once you start using the extract method in your code, then it gets really handy, and it's quite useful. And this is especially useful when you are working with cells, because you want to do the experimentation, you want to try things out, but once you have something that you want to keep and you're confident that it works, it's a good idea to move that thing away, to extract it to some separate file, some separate module. And let's do this. Let's show how to do this here. So I can take the survived and hit Control Alt P. That's going to extract it as a parameter. So in this case, I just called it X, and the same here. Control Alt P. And I'm going to call it hue, and then the data parameter as well. I'll just call it data. And okay, I'm going to remove the default parameters. And now if I'm running this again, so I'll just, with those same parameters, I expect to get the same plot. And now, of course, I can also delete this and replace it with the function that I just created. So survived based on passenger class using the Titanic data frame. And again, I can easily navigate between these plots and even delete some of them if I want to. So, Paul, do we have more questions?
We do. We have quite a number of pretty good questions. First, good job on telling everybody to post hell yes, because my first 20 questions were putting a smiley face about that. As a point, we're getting a couple of questions about run all, and it's something we know we need to do, and there's a ticket for it.
Okay.
There's a question about how to enable and disable scientific mode. Specifically, can you do it from the keyboard? It's called an action for it, and you can do it from the keyboard using find actions, and you can bind it to a key map of your own. We don't have a default key sequence for it. Now, on to the question that is half of the question so far. Are you going to put any of these files in a repo and announce the URL?
Yeah, definitely.
So everyone should, is that going to be put on here or announced later?
Later at the end, I'm going to basically put it on GitHub.
Got
The
it.
code
Right.
is going to be very basic. So this is really about PyCharm, not the code itself.
Yep. So if everyone could watch out for the blog post announcing the recording, we'll make sure it gets it into there. There was a question about, is there a shortcut for inserting a cell below? There isn't a shortcut. Again, there's like actions and stuff, but we've got a challenge with trying to preserve Jupyter-oriented key bindings versus our IDE-oriented key binding. We know it's something we need to work out. There was a question that you can handle if you could. I was answering questions and didn't notice the spot in the presentation. What is the format input box in Scientific View?
So here, so this is the format box. So we can go to some, and here I haven't used this. I just noticed it, played a bit around with it. As far as so you can put, I might be wrong on this. So something like this, and it should. Yeah, it allows to put some formatting on some of the data, but I haven't tried it out.
Okay. Do you know of anything in PyCharm? If not, I can ask the team who's watching in the background that helps with log transformation when 0 or a negative value is present. Do you want me to repeat that?
Please.
Something that helps with log transformation when 0 or a negative value is present. You want me to hand that to the team?
Okay, yes, please.
Okay, so continue.
Okay, so next I'm going to move to Jupyter support. So something to mention here, so Jupyter support in PyCharm is a complete rewrite of the old Jupyter support. The new Jupyter support provides extra value compared to just using the browser. And to me, the killer feature is the ability to debug cells, which couldn't be done with the old Jupyter support. And as far as I know, it's not working out of the box with the browser. So let's see this in action. I'm going to make this smaller and create a new Jupyter notebook. I'm just going to call it demo. And here is this is what we get. Note here this big question mark, which is quite handy. It's basically the quick list with the shortcuts to that can be used with the Jupyter. So run the cell, run and select below. This one, which I really like, the debug cell, inserting cells and so on. Here on the right side, there are these 3 buttons. This allows us to switch views. So here is sort of a split view. Your code is on the left, the output is on the right. This is output only, and this is code only. So I'm going to use the split view so that we can see results immediately. Okay, I'll start with just the classic hello and hit Control Enter. Okay, and it's starting, fingers crossed. It's executing, hello, and we have some output. One of the nice features is that it automatically starts the Jupyter server. So I just created a blank file. I wrote one very basic line and it started the Jupyter server for me. This is a nice touch. It's quite convenient. Also, I can see here the various variables. In this variable view, I can see the various Jupyter variables. Okay, remember, this is the scientific mode in which we wrote these cells. What if we actually take this code and paste it here in the Jupyter notebook, what's going to happen? And this is I like what it's doing. It's interpreting this string as a cell separator, and I can already run things. So I'm going to hit Control Enter. So this is okay. Now let me also put here the Titanic DF so that I can see some output. Okay, and here is basically the Titanic data frame. I switched to the output view to have a larger display. And this is quite similar with the experience you would expect when working with the Jupyter Notebook. Now we can run each of these cells. Clicking here, we also get the option to debug a cell. Again, here we can see the shortcuts. So Shift Enter is moving to the next one. Shift Enter to the next, to the next, to the next. Now, the good news is that we also get those. We also get the plot. Okay. Now, what I'm going to try out is to actually put a breakpoint here and start Jupyter in debug mode. So debug cell. Notice that it stopped here. Now I'll use F7 to step into count plot. Okay, and I have some debugger skip cell. It was not executed under debugger. Okay, I will stop the debugger. Probably I missed something. I'll put a breakpoint here and try again from this cell. Okay, it's still doing something. Okay, and now it basically stepped inside the count plot function. And I get access to the debugger, and I can even change some of the variables here. So let's say I replace this with passenger class. Doing that will basically generate the other plot. I'll resume execution and note that it actually displayed the plot with the passenger class, although I ran it with survived and based on sex. Okay. Paul, any questions so far?
Okay, one that we have is about interactive visualization. I'll handle that one. At the moment, we don't have JavaScript turned on in the panel on the right that's doing the visualization because we need to make sure we get the security model on it right. One of the interesting things that we're doing with our new Jupyter support is we're operating on the files directly, not going through the Jupyter server for everything. There's no export and import of your notebook files, and we use the right-hand pane for doing some things with rendering. That view needs to have a JavaScript sandbox hooked up to it. We have a ticket for talking about that.
Okay.
And then the next one, I was going to type in an answer, but I thought I'd give you a chance. What is the point of our Jupyter Notebook support in PyCharm, since we already have the IPython thing that you could do at the bottom? So if you could talk a little bit about what you and I had talked about in the interview, the workflow of having an IDE view of your notebook.
Okay, so of course we have also in scientific view we can use the IPython console, which is quite handy. However, keep in mind that Jupyter notebooks are hugely popular, so a lot of people are using them. However, then the question is not about should I use them, it's more the question, okay, what is the extra added value that PyCharm brings to Jupyter Notebook? So why would I run these in PyCharm instead of running it in the browser? And to me, the key differentiator is the debugger. But also keep in mind that this is pretty much an initial release of the support, and it already looks great. I'm confident that the JetBrains guys are working hard to put even more awesome features into it. If I remember correctly, the debugger only works with a local server, not with remote servers.
Yes, in fact, I was just answering a question about that. And thanks for bringing that up. We are still in the start of this, not the end of this. And we have a lot of plans and tickets that we're already tracking for things like Run All and also remote notebooks. That is very high on our priority list.
Okay, that's good to hear. Also, for me, one of the little features I would like is just that as I have here in the scientific mode, I can execute a little piece of code. Currently in Jupyter Notebook is not in the current support. This is not yet possible. I guess this is also one of the features to be implemented, most likely, hopefully. So this is what I'm referring to. So if I select a piece of code, Alt-Shift-E, it's not running yet. Okay. Next, the next and the final feature that I'm going to talk about is the database support. In my opinion, database support in PyCharm is very mature. Actually, as far as I understand, the database plugin is also a product on its own, something called a data grip, and all of that is included in the PyCharm. Actually, only in the PyCharm Professional Edition, but it's pretty much an awesome feature. Here I have an SQLite database, and I'm just going to double click on it. I get the database view. It already opened the SQLite database, but keep in mind that PyCharm can access a lot of other data sources. So you see a long list of databases that are supported. And here is what this can do. So if I'm selecting these tables without SQLite master, I don't care about that. A nice feature is the ability to generate a diagram with it. And this is very handy when working, if you're working with a database and you're not familiar with a schema, this provides a rich visual overview to it. So you can see the tables, and also you can see the relationships, which are the primary keys, which are the foreign keys, and so on. So see albums and how the track table has this album ID foreign key over there. So this is quite useful. So on a table, if I hit F4, I also get I get this view over it. I can also modify it. However, I would also like to go to the console. This allows me to write SQL queries. So let's say I want to select from the album table. I typically tend to put always some limit to a statement, because if you are querying a database and you have a table with millions of rows, you don't want to retrieve everything from it. And there is quite a similarity with what we saw in scientific mode and what we saw with Jupyter. So hitting Control Enter on a statement is actually going to run this statement. So there is some consistency over there. Now, that was some auto-completion that we saw, but it also can do more smart stuff. So when joining, one nice thing, it already gives some suggestions on which table it can join. So this is inferred based on those foreign keys. So in this case, I can easily join with the track table. Again, limited to only a few. Hitting Control Enter, I get to select which statement to run, and I get a lot of columns. Now, track has an alias, T, album doesn't. So hitting Alt Enter gives me the option to introduce an alias. So I will just use the suggested A. And let's say I want to select fewer columns. So from A, I would like to get the album title and the name of the track. So running this gives me titles and names. So this is the kind of functionality I would expect from a mature database support. But wouldn't it be really nice that something like this would also be available in the other with the other features? For example, in Jupyter Notebook, let's say I want to actually run some query. So I'll import SQLite. I'll trying to get a connection to it. So I'll connect again path. Join path with data and chinook.sqlite. Let's see if this works. Okay, I get some error. Okay, probably here I need to make it a string. I'll run it again. Okay, so no errors at the moment. And now I want to use from pandas. So read SQL, and here I'm going to write the SQL query. So let's say select, but note that there is no auto-completion here. So I'll just say select star from album, but that's not quite nice, right? I mean, it's an IDE. We want to have some sort of auto-completion. So I'll hit Alt Enter and inject language, and here SQLite, and somehow now when I hit Control Enter, it gets auto-completion. So note that it made the connection with it. It understood that, hey, I already opened this database and I can already give you some suggestions. Not only that, but I actually get what we also just saw previously, with the ability to get auto completion and suggestions for joins. So I'll just use the same query, and I'll run this, switch to the full output view, and note that it's basically returning the results of the query. That's to me, that's a really nice feature, to have this sort of integration. So I could write a SQL query, and I had those auto-completion features available inside the Jupyter Notebook. Paul, any questions?
Okay, perfect timing. Let's see. First, there's a question about, can you specify markdown cells? I was too busy answering questions to watch during that segment. Did you make some markdown cells?
No, but I think it's something like this, MD. Yeah, I think already something happened here, but I will try on a new cell. So this MD, and type here. Yeah, it seems to.
Yep. Let's see. There's a question about Impala support. I'll answer that to see if our database supports it. Someone asked if you could show the database view again, because it went pretty quickly.
Okay, so view, I'll activate it, tool windows, database, and here it is.
And could you open up one of the tables and show browsing it?
So let's say artist. I just clicked on artist and I already get a query on it. So note this is a drop down, and I can see, hey, his artist ID. There's a primary key on it. This is the field. The same invoice. This one has more columns.
And for other people, just to give a little bit more explanation, this is PyCharm Professional bundles Data Grip, as you mentioned. And Data Grip is a very fully featured IDE for SQL development. So it's focused on SQL, not any database possible. And so you can do things like write your queries up here. You can edit values in line. You can look at the analyze of your data. You can connect to multiple databases simultaneously and drag and drop stuff between them. So it's a pretty fully featured database tool.
Yep.
2 questions related to this. As far as the plugins for the database and how to make a connection, could you click in the database tool? Could you click
On the plus?
And just show, don't actually connect like Postgres or something.
Okay, so if we can try Postgres. Basically, what we need is what we expect in typical connection string. So put the host, user password, test a connection. Most likely, you also have this option to download missing drivers. I guess that's sort of a licensing thing that's not included out of the box. But that's just a matter of hitting a download and bang, the drivers are downloaded.
Right, and there are things to do with SSH and connecting through a Bastion jump server and stuff like that. So it's matured a lot over the years, and it covers a whole bunch of the little features that a whole bunch of edge cases cover, but very powerful and useful tool. And not only is it great as a database tool, but once you connect your project in PyCharm in the IDE, when you connect it to a data source, you then get language completion inside your Python, and you can say this string is a SQL string, and you will get autocomplete syntax highlighting of SQL inside that Python file. Not only that, you'll get autocomplete on your database tables and columns. So you'll get schema-aware completion for your project. It's a pretty freaky thing, but it is incredibly productive and useful combining your database development with your Python development.
Yes, note that this in the code, this was done, so hitting Alt-Enter, this part of inject language. So it started as an ordinary string, but as soon as I injected language, this is how it started to become aware of the database connection.
Let's see, and we got an answer to a question about running with very large output that I will reply. I apologize, there's quite a number of unanswered questions. There were 3 times more questions on this than there usually are, which is very good news. We will get back and answer all of them when we can. But we'll head back to you, Dan, if you want to do the wrap up and show maybe the course and talk a little bit more about what's happening in your Pluralsight course.
Sure. So if I would just go to Pluralsight, this is basically the course. These are the modules of and the actual clips from the course with all the topics that are covered. I'll add this to the link over here. And basically the takeaways from this presentation, so keep in mind these 3 core features of PyCharm, which are highly relevant for data scientists: the scientific mode, Jupyter support, database support. These 3 are, the nice thing is not only they are working by themselves, but they also work with each other. And if you want to learn more things, well, please check the course.
There we go. All right, great. That was fantastic. Thanks, Dan, for taking the time to talk with us about PyCharm and data science and your course and getting us really situated on scientific view and then the new Jupyter support. And thanks a lot for going extra time on the database view. It's an underappreciated part of PyCharm, as the many questions and comments in the questions panel showed. If any of you have any questions later, please don't hesitate to reach out to us by email or social media. If you would like to get more information on PyCharm, just go to our website at jetbrains.com/PyCharm. We'd love your feedback on this webinar, so please feel free to contact us on Twitter. I'm the one that will answer you. or in the after webinar survey. We actually look at those surveys. They are very useful for us. So if you have any input, please let us know. The recording will be made available on our YouTube channel soon. Watch out for that on our PyCharm blog, where you can find up-to-date PyCharm news and educational sources. So for example, the recording of Dan published there in a couple of days. We'll also provide some additional links and information from the presentation on the blog, including the repo that Dan will push his information into. And hey, if you're going to PyCon, come see us. We have a booth that we're doing wonderful things in, really packed with presentations and information and other people in the Python community. That's all from us today. Thank you very much for joining us and hope you have a nice day.